Hello crafty creators. So today I'm going to be showing you how I create a welcome sign on my Cricut. This is the original sign that I had done for this. This was the first sign I had ever made, and I sealed it with a polyurethane clear gloss, and you can see that over time it turned yellow. This did sit on my front porch the whole football season, and it did get a lot of sun, so I'm guessing that contributed to it turning yellow, but either way, it doesn't look good. I had started to repaint the yellow areas, and it was just so difficult. I decided it'd be much easier to just create a whole new board. And you can see I decided to go with a red this time. I think it's gonna look really good with white lettering. It's gonna pop really well, and then it'll look really good with the gold bands that I decided to put on. So, let me go ahead and bring you to my Cricut, and I'll show you how I create. Okay, so when I come in to start a new piece, this is for the welcome sign that I'm going to be making. I always measure the sign first and then just make a quick outline of the measurement on my Cricut workspace. So I know the sign that I had here, I click the square, so it brought a square up, and then down here you can click lock or unlock, and this allows you to change the dimensions. So if it is locked, it's going to change it evenly. If it is unlocked, it'll change it one way but not the other. So I want it unlocked because my sign is not a perfect square. So the width of my sign is going to be 9 inches. And the height of my sign is going to be 72 inches. Okay, and you can just type it in up here, or you can move the little cursor. So obviously I'm not going to be cutting this, and this here tells me that it's not supported, the image is too large. But I just want this as an outline so that I can size everything the way that I would like it. So once I have that done, I go ahead and decrease my screen size here. So we were at 100%, the size was 100%, and now we're down to 25%. I'm going to go ahead and lock this so that it doesn't accidentally get changed at all during the creation. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is create some text, and I'm going to type out welcome. Okay. So you can see here it is all automatically aligned to the left. The alignment is here, and I want it in the center because it's going to be in the center of my sign. Okay, and then I'm going to go ahead and double click that to bring up the lettering again, and instead of O, I'm just going to leave a space because my 49er emblem is going to be the O on my welcome sign. Okay, I'll go ahead and change the font first. I like to use the system fonts only because in here you get Cricut fonts, and as you can see they cost money, so you're paying for those fonts. If you click on the system fonts, that is what your computer has. Okay, and I like to use Varsity for this one, so I just type in VAR and it pops up, and there we go, I have my font now. Now what I'm going to do is keep this locked because I want the width of the font to increase with the height of the font. And I want my font to be, let's go with 70 inches real quick, and we'll see what that looks like. Okay, now I need this over my outline here of what my board is. So what I'm going to do is I have this highlighted. You can see over here it's highlighted. On Mac, we will Control Command and click the square as well. So now you can see that highlighted both of these pieces on here. Okay, and what I'd like to do is place the welcome perfectly over this square here. That is going to be my wood board. So I'm going to go to Align and click on Center. Okay, so now you can see it's perfectly centered on there, and I have room for my 49ers emblem here. Now the only problem I have with this is I wanted 2 gold bands, one around the top and one around the bottom of my welcome sign. So what I'm going to do is go ahead and click off, highlight just welcome, and I'm going to make it a little bit smaller. Let's try 65. Okay, now obviously though it's not centered anymore because it's much smaller now. Another way that you can highlight both of these is if we click and drag over both of them, it'll highlight both. Then we can go back to align and make sure it is centered again. Okay, so that gave us a little bit more room. We still have our room for our 49er emblem, and we have a little bit more room here for our gold bands that I'd like to put on. Okay, so to do the gold bands, I'd like them to wrap around the edge of the sign and to the back. So I'm going to go ahead and take Shapes, a square again, and then unlock it, and I'm just going to make a band. Okay, so let's see. I'm going to want the band quite a bit longer than the actual board so I'm able to wrap it around the back. So I'll go ahead and do that. And most of the time I'll just make these the color that they're going to be. So let's see, this is going to be white, and these are going to be gold. So that way it gives you a little bit a better idea of what it'll look like too. Now this, I want the same exact size on the bottom. So what I'm going to do is go ahead and right click on it and click duplicate. So now I have two, they're exactly the same size. So I'm going to drag this one down to the bottom and put this one there. Now obviously the top and the bottom are not going to have, they're not the same width from the top of the board here. So what I'm going to do is maximize my view here. I'm going to drag it just down to where it's aligned with the grid, and then I'll drag this to where it's aligned with a grid. So now my gold band is exactly 1 inch from the bottom. Okay, so then we'll like to keep all of this together. So I'm going to highlight the gold band, the welcome, and this. Scroll back up to the top. And now with those highlighted, these three highlighted, I'm going to drag this one up to a grid where it meets perfectly with a grid. Okay, and then we can go ahead and click off so nothing is highlighted, and then move our band to 1 inch below the start of the board. And this one, it doesn't really matter if it's perfectly aligned in the center because I'm just eyeballing it here. But if you really want it centered, you can go ahead and click, highlight those two, and align center. Okay, and then I'm going to go ahead and highlight the lettering in this and align center again because my board had moved when I aligned that. Okay, so we'll go ahead and get back out of here, decrease my view, and this is what it will look like. Now I already have the 49er emblem cut out because I had the vinyl for that quite a while ago, so I went ahead and cut that a while ago. But now I have all of my welcome stuff ready to cut out. And what I'm going to do is click on the welcome sign, and then I'm going to want to ungroup the text. And you'll notice that split up all the text on the side here. So that way it's not almost 6 feet tall and it can be cut on the Cricut mat. So before I go to cut this project, I'm going to want to take the shape of the board here, and we're going to go ahead and delete that. Okay, because number one, our Cricut can't cut it that large, and number two, we don't need the board cut. We already have a board. It was simply just a sizing tool. Okay, so now this is ready to cut, so we'll go ahead and click Make It. Okay, so now we're ready to cut the vinyl. So we've transitioned to my lovely garage. I have my Cricut machine here on my little workbench. Woo, there we go. And then down below here, I have all of my paints and everything, but in the back here I have vinyl and paper and all kinds of stuff in the little boxes back there. So we'll be taking our vinyl from there and cutting it all up with our Cricut. So as you can see, I've got my laptop over here on our other workbench. What I'm gonna do is go ahead and take the cord and plug it into the laptop. And then plug my Cricut machine in to the power. Okay, and I'm just gonna scoot this back a little bit. And we'll go ahead and turn it on. Probably a good idea to open it. And as you can see, she's a little bit dirty, but she gets the job done. So first, before we start cutting, I need to get my vinyl set up on a mat. So let me go ahead and grab my mat out, which is also underneath. With the Cricut mats, I like to save the little clear sheet that goes over it. That way my sticky, it stays sticky. It's like a protector. So first I'll peel her off and come put her over on the side over here. Okay, so the first cut on there is only going to be 11 inches. So I'm going to go ahead and take my Cricut mat and I'll just place the vinyl to 11 inches. Okay, and then we'll line it up here on the mat. And make sure it's all down and nice and flat. Okay, she's connecting. Okay, so you can see I already have my setting for cutting set to vinyl. I'm gonna go ahead and switch it to vinyl plus just so I make sure it cuts really well. And then you can see the loading button is flashing, so it would like me to get this mat loaded. Okay, so I just make sure it's pressed up against the bar here nice and well, and then I'll press the load button and it will load itself. Okay, and then it's ready to cut once the Cricut is flashing. We press her and let her go. All right, so I can see the cuts in here and it did go all the way through, so we'll go ahead and eject and we can remove this vinyl. Oopsies. Okay, so I have all of the white lettering cut, so now I need to cut the gold bands. So another way that I can measure how long my vinyl needs to be is just lining it up on the edge here, because there is measurements on the edge of the Cricut mat here. And then I'll just find the point where it needs to be cut, make a little slit, and then I can finish cutting across the grid here. So we'll put our excess back, and now we just have a piece that is the correct size for what we're making. We'll get it lined up on the corners there and spread it out. Okay, so the same thing, I'm going to go ahead and load this onto the mat here. Wait for it to pick up. Make sure my screen's on. Okay, and then press the cut button. I've finished all the cutting on the Cricut and I've come back to the main screen. Now we no longer have the outline of our board here, so I'm going to go ahead and click back. Oops. The back button so that our board pops up again. Now I'm going to measure between each of these letters and then between the gold bands so that I can see where I need to mark on my board and place each letter. So I'm going to zoom in, okay, and then we're going to take the square again, and instead of eyeballing and like, I can't tell how far that is, we're going to line up the square with the yellow I'm going to get in there real close to make sure I'm lined up pretty closely. Okay, we're going to line up with the gold band. Oopsies. Unlock this square and then line up with our W. And now we can see that there's 0.9 inches between our gold band and our W, so just below an inch. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to draw a little line on a piece of paper to represent my gold band, and then I'm going to put 0.903, which the 0.3 is not really going to make much of a difference, but if I write it there, when I go back to measure on my board, I can see how close to an inch we actually were or how far we were. So after that 0.903, I'm going to write my W. Okay, now I'm going to take this square to the bottom of my W. And I'm going to line it up there as close as possible. Then I'm going to stretch her all the way down to my E. So I think you get the point here. I'm going to go ahead and drag that same little square between each of the letters and measure out how far the width is from one letter to the next, so I know how far to place them on my board. Between everything, so you can see here I have the W, E, L, C, and then M, E. We already knew from the beginning that I placed the gold band 1 inch from the top and 1 inch from the bottom and 1 inch from the top. So I didn't need to measure those ones. But I went ahead and used that little square to measure in between each of these, and it came out pretty even, so it's looking real good. Okay, so now I'm going to go ahead and measure between each space that the gold bands and the letters need to be placed. So first I'm just going to mark the first little measurement there, which was 1 inch from the top. And once it's marked, I'll go ahead and place the gold band. Okay, so for the gold bands, I'm just going to peel them right off. They're perfectly straight, so it's not like something that's difficult to put on. I don't need to use any type of transfer tape or anything to apply the gold band. So I'm going to go ahead and just take it up to the front there and slap it on. Okay, so here's what the gold band looks like. It's nice and perfect from the top, 1 inch, and it's nice and straight. So now I'll measure from the gold band down to see where I need to place my W. Okay, so now we are measuring where my next letter needs to go, the W. And I'm going to make a couple lines for this one just so that I have a couple points of reference so that I'm ensuring that the W is fairly straight. On this one, I did not measure perfectly how far apart the W needed to be from each side, just because the lettering is so wide, it's not very far from either side, so it's pretty simple to eyeball. Okay, so I went and got some painter's tape to use as transfer tape for my W, and I'm just going to place a couple pieces that are a little wider than the W itself. That way it'll be easy to pull off the actual vinyl. So I like to stick it on my clothing so that it removes some of the stickiness and the vinyl doesn't stick to it very badly. And now I'm going to take my painter's tape and just use it as you would transfer tape. I'm going to smooth it over the W nice and evenly and rub it pretty hard to make sure that the painter's tape picks up all of the vinyl. And sometimes I go and get a credit card to do this, but it wasn't necessary. I was able to lift the W off of the paper easily, and this will allow me to lay it perfectly straight. So now we have our W detached from the sticky back paper stuff, and I'm just going to line each of the top parts of the W with the little lines that I measured onto the board. And this is all just eyeballing. I'm usually not too horrible at it, and the little lines you make help a lot. Okay, so now I'm just going to smooth it all down on there and make sure it's nice and flat and that I'm able to lift up the painter's tape without pulling up the actual vinyl. So here I'm starting to do that, just peel back the painter's tape, and as you can see it's peeling off really nicely. I don't need to get any extra supplies. Sometimes, like I said, I use a credit card to make sure it's on there really well, but this came off very nicely. Okay, so here is what it's looking like, and I'm going to go ahead and carry it on, measure from the W to where the E needs to be, and just keep going until I get all of my lettering on there. Here we go. This is what it's going to look like. Looks pretty straight. So now I'm going to seal my sign, and this time I'm going to use a polyacrylic protective finish in a clear matte. I've really been loving this finish, and it's super easy to work with. I'm just going to use a regular all-purpose bristle brush. Okay, so we're just going to dip it right in the can and start spreading it on there. I want to get a good, nice, thick coat on there. That way this board holds up to the weather, and hopefully this finish, the sealant, will not turn yellow like the last one did. I have used this one a couple times, and I haven't had it turn yellow at all yet. So, fingers crossed that this will do the same. Okay, so here we have the finished product. Everything turned out really smooth. The finish is so nice. There you have it, crafty creators. That is how I make my welcome signs with my Cricut, and how I place the vinyl, how I measure everything, how I seal it, all that good stuff. Thank you so much for watching. If you love this video, give it a big thumbs up and make sure you subscribe so you can see all of my crafty creations.